Rahab, yes. Good job. I'm going to tell you a beautiful story about God's love and redemption and how he loved me and he saved me. I know that you've all been hearing about God's team, right? And I heard that you were all a part of God's team. And so I was so excited that I had to share with you my story. So I am in a land called Canaan, and specifically in a city called Jericho. And it's surrounded by big mountains and valleys, but also my specific city has a huge wall, and it's very big. And in my city, we are very evil and wicked, and I myself was very evil and wicked, and I did things that didn't please God. I did things that hurt his heart and made him sad. And there was gods that I worshipped that weren't God. And I just went along with everyone in my city and did exactly what they did. And you see my pretty fancy jewelry. The only thing I cared about was being wealthy and rich. I have this really nice home that's inside the city that has a window that looks out in the mountains. And the one thing that I cared about is being successful and being able to get the things that I wanted materialistically to make me happy and to serve myself. And that's the way that I thought life was about. I just thought that you just want to be successful and get things, and there isn't much apart from that. But I also felt empty, and I felt very sad, and I knew that there was something in life that I was missing, but I wasn't sure what. But all of a sudden, one day, I heard a knock at the door, and 2 spies came into my home. And I thought, okay, they're strangers, but I just felt okay about it, and that I could welcome them in and see what they needed and how I could help them. And these 2 men, they told me about the one true God. And they told me about how they were coming to see the city and to see how God could help them take over the city. Because the people of Canaan, for 500 years, God was trying to get them to obey. Abraham came to Canaan and told them about God, and they didn't believe. Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, 2 cities, because they didn't believe. And God was trying so hard to show my people, the Canaanites, that he was real and that he wanted their love, and he wanted them to turn from their wicked ways and to believe and trust in God. And I heard this story, and I knew right away that I needed to trust in God and that I wanted to be a part of his team. I didn't want to be a part of the team that was actually Satan's team, and they were worshiping other gods and they weren't believing in the true God. And we had all heard stories about the Israelites, and now I had 2 of them in my home. So I felt like I felt pretty special that God would choose me to let them come and share their stories with me. So I asked them, I said, I believe in your God. When you come to try to defeat our city, which I believe that they would, can you please spare me? And not only me, I wanted my brothers and my sisters, my aunts, my uncles, my mom and dad. I asked him if he could spare my entire family. And you know what they said? What do you think they said?
Yes.
They said yes, they did. And I trusted in God. And I turned from my sin. And I asked for forgiveness. And no longer was I sinful in my own way on Satan's team. Now I decided to be like you and join God's team. So I was a redeemed Rahab. And I know that redeemed is a pretty big word. Does anybody know what that does mean?
It means that you turn from someone else's way. Like if you were on Satan's team, you go to that team and you're redeeming yourself and start acting good.
Right. So in the Bible, redeemed means to buy back. So I was a slave to my sin, and I was not obeying God, and I was doing things that the world told me to do and not what God told me to do. And so now I've turned and I asked for forgiveness, so God brought me back. So no longer am I a slave to sin, and do I need to do the things that matter in the world's eyes, but I can do the things that are right in God's eyes, which is trusting and obeying him. And so I was unashamed of the sins because God cleansed me. And he made me at peace, and I knew that I was doing things that were making God sad, but all of a sudden I just felt this joy and this peace because I knew that God forgave me, and I knew that I was on his team, and he was going to help me in my new journey with obeying him. So I had this really long rope and cord. Does anyone know what color that is?
Scarlet.
Do you know what that is? Red. Do you think you can guess what you think this red cord could symbolize? Go ahead.
Jesus' blood?
Yes, Jesus' blood. That's right. So this scarlet cord, I had a window, like I said, that looked out right into the mountains and the valleys, and I had an awesome view because I worked very hard and I had money, so I could have a really nice house. Well, this window went all the way down the wall, and I tied it so that the men could escape. And they said, keep this cord here so that we will know that this is your home. And since I asked to be saved, right, they were going to come back for me. They were going to make sure that not only myself, but my entire family was protected. So I put this scarlet cord in the window. Well, all of a sudden, we saw the Israelites starting to come our way. And that meant that they crossed the River Jordan, which is a very tough thing to do, right? Does anyone know how that happened?
With Joshua, they parted it.
Yes, that's right. And I'm sure crew and all of you are going to say the same thing, right? So God miraculously spread the sea. And there was another time that I heard of that happened as well. Because the Israelites were part of, go ahead, crew.
The 12 tribes, and Jesus parted the Red Sea for Moses.
Yeah.
For Moses and the Egyptians. And I knew about this. So my city, some of us were talking about that, going, whoa, these are the Israelites. We've heard of them. They have a different God, and they say that their God is true and that he is right. And he saved them unlike our gods. And he saved them from the Red Sea. He also brought them food from heaven, right? They asked for food, and he gave them food from heaven. And some of us were, I knew that I believed, but I was just hearing people amongst the city. Some were going, we don't need to be terrified. Look at our strong walls. And the other ones were saying, I don't know, this God seems like he could be real. There could be miracles that happen, and maybe we should be a little worried. But overall, as a city, people kind of had their who's going to be fearful and who's not going to worry about it. So I was just kind of going around listening as I was walking around the city, not saying anything, because I knew that God was real and that he was true and that he had a plan. So the Israelites camped out, and all of a sudden they made their way to Jericho. Well, the only thing that the Israelites had in order to defeat Jericho were bows, arrows, and swords. How hard do you think it would be to get through a big wall?
Pretty hard.
Yeah, it would be like straws bouncing off, ding, 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 if they tried. So the Canaanites weren't worried because they had big battering rams and they had a lot of weapons and a huge army. And they just said, they're not going to be able to get through this. There's nothing they can do to break our walls because we have built ourselves up and we are awesome and nobody's going to get through. But God had a different plan. He had all of his people, the Israelites, form a big line and they marched, right? And I was sitting here watching going, I don't really know what's going on, but I know something cool is about to happen. So I'm just going to be okay about it and at peace and know that God's going to save me. So for 7 days, they marched around once, and then they'd go back. And on the 7th day, when they marched around, does anyone know what they did? Okay, I'll go on.
The sound of the trumpets, and when they went around that one more time, the whole wall collapsed.
Yes. And what else? You know what the people did? They used a different type of instrument besides a trumpet if they didn't have it. Their
Voice.
Yes, their voice, and that can also be an instrument. And we also can sing as an instrument, right? Well, they used their voices, ah! And everyone just screamed and blew trumpets, and the walls came down. And God also took over this city, and they were able to show the Canaanites that they were the one true God, and that they lived. And guess what? Before that happened, what do you think happened to me? Where do you think?
You were taken away to safety with your family?
That's right. I was taken away to safety before that happened because God promised me, and I knew that he was going to save me and my family. So before the wall came down, they found my scarlet cord, and that was the sign that I was on God's team. And we all climbed down there. And then now I'm a part of Israel. And I believe in the one true God, and I'm so excited about it, and I'm going to share it and be a part of this, and I shared it with my family. And what are different ways? I'm just sharing my story with you. What are different ways that you can share the story about being on God's team?
Put on the internet.
But on the internet, you can do that. That's very brave, yes. Maybe just from day to day, just some little acts of kindness. Being kind to others and helping them, helping your parents, helping your brothers and sisters, being obedient, right? And living a life that is obeying God, right? And not obeying ourselves. And not being afraid to be on God's team and to share the good news, right? Because in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your path. And that is my favorite new verse that was given to me when I became a part of God's team, is to know that we can trust in the Lord with all of our hearts, wholeheartedly trust him, and know that he has an amazing plan for our lives, and that if we walk in him and obey him, that he is going to direct our paths throughout our life, and we don't need to be afraid. And we don't need to be afraid of being on God's team, even if there's other people that aren't.